Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And on the line with us is Greg Palast, the investigative journalist and reporter, contributor to Rolling Stone magazine, author and filmmaker of The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. You can find it at Amazon and other places. GregPalast.com is his website. You can tweet him at Greg_Palast, P-A-L-A-S-T. Greg, welcome back to the program.
Hey, glad to be with you, Tom, from the 6th of Georgia.
So, yeah, you're where Louise and I used to live in both Roswell and Marietta. So you're in our old stomping grounds where we raised our kids, actually.
Okay. Yeah, it's I'm laughing because I haven't exactly had the kindest welcome here by some parts of the community.
I can imagine. I remember when one of my kids, my recollection is my son came home from school one day, and I said, "What'd you learn in school today?" He was like 7 or 8 years old at the time. And he said, "Oh, we learned about the War of Northern Aggression." I'm like, "Oh, we are in the South." You're in Georgia's 6th. This is Newt Gingrich's old district. He was my congressman when we lived there. And John Ossoff is running against Karen Handel in that race. Correct me if I'm wrong. And we have a little clip of Karen Handel. I'd like to play that and get your thoughts and comments on it, if that's all right with you, Greg.
You got me?
Okay, here she is. This is the Republican candidate for Congress from Georgia's 6th.
And talking about you running, you have a debate coming up on our station. How are you preparing?
That's a reporter
asking. So I feel very good about it. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks so much. Thank you.
Hi, the GOP's raided the offices. Sorry.
Here's Greg Palast.
Okay, wait a second. What is this? Is that how you're answering? It's not. I'm not assaulting anyone. I'm trying to ask the candidate a question. The GOP has raided the offices of registration. Is this a way for you to remove black voters and Asian voters from the voter roll? I realize I'm asking a question. They're asking a question.
They also
have some respect for the democratic process.
USA.
Okay, fine. I'm just trying to ask you a question. Could not be
Thank you very much.
Sorry,
you understand the meaning of the
I just want to ask you. It's not about being rude. It's about asking a question about registration. Why are you trying to bring criminal charges against registration groups, Asian and black registration groups? Get out of here, liberal! Are you an idiot, liberal? I'm just trying to answer the question.
Right. So, Greg, tell us what was going on there.
Well, actually, it started out, both Ossoff and Handel were at this memorial service. Ossoff was playing by the rules that said no interviews, no politicking, and stood quietly, head bowed throughout the ceremony. Handel, the Republican, former Secretary of State, who was in charge of voter rolls when those voter rolls in her own district got purged very white, was politicking, handing out stickers, doing TV interviews, and she began with a polite, by the way, interview with me because I asked her if the Democrats were stealing the election in the 6th CD, which is, by the way, one of her claims and the claims of Donald Trump's organization. And she was happy to answer that, but then I said, well, okay, well, what about the GOP? Is the GOP using Jim Crow tactics to purge the voter rolls, to intimidate voters, and to steal the 6th? And at that moment, two of her goons, you didn't see it in the film because that was earlier, went from polite and suddenly I was physically grabbed, pulled away from her. And then I tried to get back in, as you see, to ask the question. I had to shout it over the top of her handlers who were muscling me and, grabbing me. And, it's a new thing. It's, I guess, after the 6th, after the Republican.
After Gianforte body slammed the Guardian reporter, Jason Burke, I think his name was.
Jacob.
Or Jacob, yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Jacob, Ben Jacobs.
Ben Jacobs, that's right.
The Guardian. And, I guess they got this new thing. If they want to show how tough they can be with the press, and God forbid you ask a tough question. And it wasn't her manhandling of me or her handlers manhandling me that I cared about. It was actually what they're doing here in the 6th. I've returned here after 3 years. In my film, The Best Democracy Money Can Buy, you meet an Asian American group, which is which started a drive called 10,000 Koreans, 10,000 Korean voters to register 10,000 Korean Americans, mainly in that 6th CD.
Yeah, when we lived in Marietta back in the 80s, there were a lot of Korean
It's a huge.
They were moving. There were a lot of immigrants moving into that area, specifically from South Korea.
Huge. And so what's happened is you add in the Asian Americans, the Latinos, and the new middle-class black population, and suddenly Newt Gingrich's district is demographically minority.
Right.
And so how are you going to elect a Republican? The answer is that you get the non-white folks off the voter rolls. As Secretary of State, Karen Handler was the one who signed up Georgia and started implementing the Chris Kobach, Donald Trump cross-check program of claiming that voters are voting twice. And they were really going after the Asian American voters in the 6th. We met a voter in the 6th, Mr. Soon Park, and that's like Joe Smith in America. That name is so common. He was accused of voting twice. His vote was threatened. A massive attack on Asian American voters. I asked her about that, her using that purge list. Yet she never, she removed thousands of voters from the voter rolls to clean her own district up for her own run. But she never arrested anyone for actually voting twice, just made the accusation against Korean Americans. Some of them were having some real trouble with the English and very scared. They actually shut down the group. They began a criminal investigation of the Asian American vote registration group. They shut it down with
Shades of Acorn.
Criminality. They grabbed all their files, their computers, intimidated them. They lost their fundings. And so the Korean American voter registration drive basically came to a dead halt. Then all charges and allegations were dropped. So then they brought them against the major group, New Georgia Project, registering African Americans and Latinos in the district. And that investigation is still going on with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, like their local FBI actually, kind of kicked in the door of the group and grabbed computers and files and is, threatening criminal charges for illegally registering voters, whatever the heck that is. And again, no charges, just intimidation and attempt to shut down the group, the African American group, as they did the Asian American group. I wanted to ask Handler about her operation, herself as Secretary of State, and her successor, a guy named Brian Kemp, running for governor now of Georgia. And I was not, she just didn't want to answer those questions. But it's not just saying, no, I'm not going to answer that question, or I don't, forget it, it's not true. This is the old way of responding to questions you are uncomfortable with, saying it's not true, I disagree. But apparently the new way is to start muscling reporters. And again, what the problem is, I see what happens. After I was muscled, every reporter asked the most polite questions like how do you prepare for a debate, et cetera. Suddenly everyone got nervous that they were going to get cut off. And you have to understand, in the news business, if you're a local news person and you lose access to the local candidates, you lose your job. And so I felt very sorry for these people who basically intimidated into not asking any tough questions about the race.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing. We're talking with Greg Palast, the independent investigative reporter and contributor to Rolling Stone magazine, former reporter for BBC and others, author and filmmaker of The Best Democracy Money Can Buy. GregPalast.com is his website. You can tweet him at Greg_Palast. Greg, we just have a minute or so before we hit a break here. What can people do to stop this voter suppression that's going on in Georgia's 6th?
Well, talking to some of the black ministers, now there was a big meeting at the ACLU, NAACP, the black ministers in the 6th, about bringing legal actions, but most important, telling people don't be afraid, don't be intimidated, and constantly check your registration. Make sure they are purging people left and right on, as supposed illegal aliens is the new charge, or that, and yet they're not arresting anyone for committing these what are crimes, voting illegally. They're just making the accusation, pulling you off the voter rolls. It's massive in the 6th, and just to understand, 10,000 Koreans. You had thousands who were not allowed to register in the 6th, and Jon Ossoff only lost by 3,700 votes. Every single expert I talked to said if any one of these voter suppression techniques would have changed the outcome, so he would have won the election outright, he should be walking away with this. He's ahead 7 points in the polls. It shouldn't even be a contest. But mainly, you have to keep pushing. Check your registration and get informed.
There you go. And in the meantime, let's talk to our state legislators, or our federal legislators, about a federal right to vote amendment to the Constitution. Greg Palast. Greg, thanks so much for being with us.
You're the best, Tom. Thank you.
Good talking. We'll be back.